Hey everyone, welcome to the Netsuite Podcast. I'm your host, Kendall Fisher, and I'm teaming up to co-host this episode with our Netsuite business and finance editor, Megan O'Brien. Hi, Megan.
Hi, Kendall. Thank you so much for having me. This is all very exciting.
It is very exciting. I've been bugging Fritz to let you co-host with me, not let you, but I've been telling him, hey, I think Megan and I should co-host an episode together. So I'm excited. We're finally doing it. Previously, we've had Ian McHugh actually take over for a couple episodes. So, we're just shaking it up on this podcast. I love it. But since this is your first time co-hosting, I thought it would be nice for our audience to get to know you with none other than a fun fact. Hate to be cliche, but I know you have a lot of fun facts, Megan. So I got to ask you.
Oh my gosh, let me just pull from the stockpile. No, my go-to lately has been I once bungee jumped off the Victoria Falls Bridge in Zambezi, Africa. It was a great thing to do because now I have a very easy go-to for a fun fact. But it was arguably the most terrifying moment of my life.
Wow. That is a great fun fact. I don't have anything like that. I'm afraid of heights. So bungee jumping is just not a thing for me, but I know, you're also a runner. You run marathons, which I think is insane. We talked a lot about that. And so I was wondering where you were going to go with this, but yeah, that's a good one, Megan. That's a good one.
Oh, thank you.
And as much as I could talk about all your fun facts, I think it's important that we probably get to the topic at hand here and why you are actually helping me co-host this episode. We're going to be joined by Glenn Hopper, Sandline CFO and author of Deep Finance, Corporate Finance in the Information Age.
Yes. So I actually read the book and we're going to dive into a few of the topics that Glenn touches on, from what it means to be a new age CFO, what he thinks why CFOs need to know data science, and how, practically speaking, more companies can help their finance team gain those skills.
That's right. Of course, with that, we're also going to touch on technology and the buzzwords of all buzzwords, digitization and digital transformation. But we're going to do it different. We're going to ask really for Glenn to define it, what it is, what it isn't, and how to get your team across the organization on board in adopting it.
And he even touches on NetSuite and how he plans to use it to become a more data-driven organization. So that was a very exciting point.
Yes, for sure. And with that, Megan, you know what? I think we got to get right into this interview. Let's do it right after this.
You're listening to the Netsuite Podcast, where we discuss what's happening within NetSuite, why we're doing it, and where we're heading in the future. We'll dive into the details about the software and the people at NetSuite who are behind all the moving parts. We'll also feature customer growth stories, discussing the ups and downs of running a company and how one integrated system can help your business continue to scale.
Hi, Glenn. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, Kendall. Glad to be here.
Megan has actually told me a lot about you, as I noted in the introduction to this episode. She has read your book, so we're excited to interview you today and dive into some of that.
Yeah. Thank you both. I'm really looking forward to talking about it.
And where are you recording from today?
I'm in Nashville, Tennessee.
Oh, wow.
One of my favorite cities. I have always said that if I could move anywhere, and I've through this job, which I'm very lucky, before COVID, I was able to travel to all different parts of the country and world to visit customers and chat with them and interview them. And I have to say, Nashville is my favorite city. It's the one city that, and weirdly, Oklahoma City, where I was like, I could actually see myself moving here. So I'm a big fan of Nashville. Love it.
Well, Oracle is building the big facility here in Nashville too. It looks like it's going to be a beautiful space.
I know, with a couple thousand job opportunities.
Yeah.
Maybe one day I'll make my way over there. I'm actually from born and raised right outside of Los Angeles and currently live in Santa Monica. Haven't left the West Coast, but I feel like one day it'll happen. One day I'm looking forward to it. And Megan, you're in Colorado, right?
I am right in Denver.
Nice. So all of us tuning in from different parts of the country, which I love. Probably a lot chillier where you guys are than where I am in Santa Monica, although it did get to like 58 degrees the other day, which is a big deal here. So cold weather, winter's here finally. So I think we should kick things off. Glenn, before we really dive into, the topic at hand and your book and some of the themes within it, how about you tell us a bit about your background and your path to becoming a CFO?
Sure. I used to think this was unusual. So I would sort of caveat how I came into the CFO role as, I didn't do the typical CPA, public accounting controller to CFO role, but I'm seeing more CFOs now that have a similar path to what I've had. I came in a previous life, I was a journalist, and then I went to business school, and then I worked in marketing, and from marketing ended up becoming the de facto numbers guy for the marketing group, I guess, just because I could use Excel. I always say that the reason that I was promoted quickly in finance was I was really good at Excel and PowerPoint. And it was, and this is in the late 90s, back in the day when they still had Clippy on all the Microsoft apps. So the fact that I could use these two pieces of software was more impressive than anything I knew on the finance side, I guess. But yeah, so I came from the came from the marketing side and then the business side. My first finance role was reporting for the COO of a telecommunications company. And he basically wanted his own finance guy within his group to help, to help him lobby for bigger budgets when he was going to the finance group every year. But it was really good coming up in finance that way, because I did from the beginning, I had this collaborative approach to it in that, in finance, it's easy. If you just are in finance and you don't work within the departments, it's easy to just kind of live in your ivory tower and not understand the needs of the other groups. And I think that really founded my approach to finance. And it's something that stuck with me, now 15 years and 4 different CFO roles later.
Yeah, for sure. And we're going to actually get into some of what you just said, which I love, but I love that you said that in another life you were a journalist. Welcome to my life. I actually studied broadcast journalism and started off in entertainment news before coming over to NetSuite. So I was going to actually ask you why did you decide to write a book? But now you have a writer's background, don't you?
That's it. Yep.
And did that kind of basically make you realize, I can take the best of both of my lives. I'm air quoting right now and write a book out of this, or what kind of led you to that?
Well, it's funny. I've always wanted to, you've all got sort of that secret life that you might have lived in another universe. And for me, being a fiction writer would have been that secret life. I do think that my journalism background contributed to my success in finance, just being able to communicate what I was doing in finance. And I think that making it accessible, I was half joking about being good at PowerPoint, but really it was not about being good at PowerPoint. It was taking these complex models and being able to explain them to the people in the other groups in the company or investors or board members or whoever the audience is. And the journalism was a great background for that. But it's also, through the years, I find myself, when I'm trying to figure something out, when I want to dive deeper into something, I'll decide to go write a blog or an article about it. So I've always been a blogger, and I've got I post on Medium all the time and various platforms. And as I have been going through the past few years, as I've discovered things, I've written articles about them, and many of them published, many of them not. But a couple of years ago, I looked and I thought, I've got 60,000 words of business process articles here. What is something I could do with this? And that's kind of what led to the book. And really just doing this for as long as I have, and by doing this, I mean being a CFO in a startup environment. I'm seeing that I'm the same issues and problems and challenges are coming up in multiple companies. And I thought, well, if I'm experiencing these, other people are too. So my approach to the book was, what if I could lay out a roadmap based on what I've learned and what I've seen?
And it's funny, I'm kind of absorbing everything you're saying. And I think you're just preaching to the choir here, because I'm the same way, where I come across a concept or something and I have to write it out, and some things get published, some just live in my notes, and that's fine with me. But it's also interesting to touch on kind of your unusual path to being a CFO, because I used to work for a Big Four company where we would work with various CFOs and help them kind of develop and come up with strategic game plans for where they were going. And some did have the very typical, like, I was a CPA and I did this and then I became CFO. And some really came out of left field, and it really came down to that root of communication. Like you said, they were able to lead and communicate and take something complex and distill it down. So it's great to hear how your journalism background really informed that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think being able to effectively communicate, no matter what your role is, I mean, it just adds so much value when you can, think about if you were an engineer or a physicist or whatever, it's, half of what you do is so obscure and abstract that nobody understands it. But if you can then take it and make it applicable to a general audience, it's, you become like the Neil deGrasse Tyson of the industry,
Exactly. Because we all need someone just to explain certain things to us. I'm constantly looking for that. So you work for a company called Sandline right now. Can you explain the company, what it is that they do?
Sure. So Sandline is an e-discovery company, which is a kind of legal technology. And the simplest way to explain it is, in any lawsuit, whether you're a plaintiff or a defendant, there's the discovery phase of the lawsuit. And there's interrogatories where there are questions sent over to both parties. And there's discovery or depositions where people are interviewed heading into the case. And then there's also turning over of documentation. And for years ago, it would have just been, whatever, empty out your file cabinet with relevant files and fill a banker's box and send them over. But with the advent of, digitization of everything in the business world, and everything from emails to CAD drawings to social media posts. I mean, these are all admissible, but there's so much data out there, and it's so difficult to gather that you can't just send over, a couple of paralegals with bankers boxes anymore. So there's a whole industry around the collection, processing, and production of this data, sorting through it and determining what's relevant, what's not, what's privileged, what's not. And it's a pretty interesting industry, because there's a SaaS component to it, and there's also a transactional component, kind of a time and materials component. We have expert project managers who help with going through all this information and preparing it for the clients. It's a pretty complex industry, and it's one that's pretty fun to be in right now. There's a whole lot of M&A activity in it, a whole lot of new technology coming in. We're using a lot of machine learning and artificial intelligence on analyzing these documents. And this is my second company that I've been with in this industry, and it's been really fun just to see how much it changes and moves, and all the M&A and new technology coming out on a seemingly monthly basis.
Yeah, for sure. It's something we talk about a lot, just all, not just new technology, but all the data that's right at our fingertips, and how to sort through that and make sure you have the right data to make the right decisions at the right time. We talk about that a lot when it comes to our tool, NetSuite Suite Analytics, and really how that automates that for you. But it's a huge challenge our audience, our customers and our businesses in general face.
Yeah, and it's right in line with what I talk about in Deep Finance.
Yep.
Now, I mean, especially considering all the complexity and the movement going on, what does a typical, and I'm also using air quotes right now, what does a typical day in your shoes look like, and how has that evolved over the past 2 years?
Yeah, so 2 years is an interesting timeline, because 2 years ago, I was at a different company, and I was brought in by the board of directors to help prepare the company for sale. And a lot of what I write about in the book comes from lessons I learned in that and things that I saw in that transaction. But once that company was sold, I moved over to this company who's not looking to sell, but they're looking to put themselves in a better position to be an acquirer of other companies as time goes on. And so the difference between what I was doing in my last company and what I'm doing now, so that was 1 year at the last company and then my year that I've been at Sandline, I knew that one of the first things I needed to do was start to sort of wrangle the disparate systems that the company was using and be able to start getting a handle on the data that we have and on our processes and procedures. So I decided, the first few months were kind of getting my feet wet and doing some sort of forensic accounting to clean up the books from before I got there. And then as soon as that was done, I started moving in earnest with deciding to adopt NetSuite, not just for the accounting side, but also as our de facto CRM and our project management tool. So my typical day for the past, since we signed on with NetSuite, has been more project management than CFO, honestly. I mean, I have to, review the invoices, close the month, report the financials and all that. But my day-to-day existence is on navigating, getting everybody on board, helping sort of train the trainers within our company on how to use NetSuite, deciding what we're going to put in there, what we're not, data migration. And it's been an interesting challenge. And it's a step back from what I think my favorite thing to do is just get lost in a huge FP&A model and budgeting stuff out with polynomials and stuff. But I'm so excited about making the move that I am, that it feels very foundational, and it's fun to build and know where all these data pieces are and that I'm collecting them and that I'm aggregating them in a single system. So we're coming very close to actually going live with NetSuite. And then I'm hoping I can spend more of my time sort of geeking out on the data and building, like you talked about the analytics side. But for really the past few months, I've been almost a full-time project manager.
I think you might be the first person to say that they enjoy polynomials in a sense.
Yeah.
Or at least on this podcast.
But I appreciate that. I wish I did.
High school me would be making so much fun of me right now.
You know what? It works for you.
Yeah.
So in terms of after implementation in NetSuite, you kind of mentioned getting into the data analytics more. Can you kind of dive into that and just an overall sense of how you think your role will evolve post implementation?
Yeah. And I think how my role will evolve is how I see, and we'll see how this shakes out, but it's how I see all CFO roles evolve. It's crazy right now to think it's hard to, if you name any finance function, I bet we know a piece of software out there, cloud-based, whatever, that automates that, whether it's expense tracking or AP management, AR management, even closing the books. There is software out there. Most of it these days is RPA, robotic process automation, but all the stuff that we historically did is getting automated. And what I am pushing for is not that we need to eliminate jobs, but that we need to change the skill set and what finance as a department can do going forward. So whereas there used to be someone who sat there and manually entered invoices or generated invoices for the company to send out or tracking expense reports, you still have the same number of people, but instead of doing that mindless work, they're doing more mindful tasks and they're thinking more strategically. So I think that the pandemic has maybe accelerated a lot more of the digitization. Did I throw an extra syllable or is that?
There you go. That works for us.
Yeah. of the workplace. I think that, by everyone being remote and trying to solve for this, I think that that's accelerated some things, but I also think if you are not moving with that you're going to be caught flat-footed, and the growth is coming so fast now. It's not linear, it's exponential. And if you're slow to adapt to it, you're going to get left behind. And either your company is going to get left behind, or you as a practitioner, you as a CFO or a controller or whatever role you have in the company, if you're not evolving, then you're going to be obsolete in 5 or 10 years. So a big thing that I'm pushing for is, if you think about finance's role in an organization, historically, it's been the record keeper, and you just report the numbers. And for years, finance guys are just called the bean counters. And that sounds like a very boring job in and of itself. But you're in this position, you're in an impartial role. Impartial meaning your skin in the game. You're not going to favor sales and marketing over operations, over any other group. You're just you're an objective Socratic observer of the data. And so in my roles in finance, I've sort of become, over the years, the keeper of the KPIs for all the groups. And because of that, and it really started out of FP&A, of financial planning and analysis, of building the budgets and trying to take this old or whatever data I could get and apply it to a predictive model for the future. But as you start gathering more of this data, you start to see the same metrics and metrics that would make sense. So long-winded answer to say that I see the chief financial officer with the right skill set and with the right people could also be the chief data officer of a company. And I think that the analytical skills that make you good at finance also make you good at data, but you can't just be a finance guy anymore, because I think that it's going to be harder and harder to find value as a human being and not a machine as just a finance guy.
Right. So is this, in your book, you talk about the new age CFO. Is this the new age CFO you're talking about? Somebody who could be a data analyst and a head of finance? Or what would you define as a new age CFO? What qualities do you need to become one?
Yeah. So I think that, if you think about the tools that we're using have changed. Honestly, to be, the basics of accounting, you think of debits and credits, and how long has it been since, I guess accountants actually do, still look at the debits and credits. But for me, it's just, as a finance guy, I'm not thinking about, debit this account and credit this account, because software, you just enter the invoice and it knows through machine learning or just rules of, how to code it, but you're not thinking about the actual debits and credits. So the nature of the job is changing. So, accountants have to have their CPE hours, finance people don't, but any job that you're having, you've got to have, you've got to stay up to speed on what the latest is going on. And, yes, in finance and accounting, you have to understand the new lease rules and how the IRS treats lease, that kind of stuff. That's fine, but that can even be automated as well. You have to see where the value in the role comes from and where it's going. So to be a new age CFO, you're using all these automated tools. Great. You've streamlined your department. You can close instead of taking 15 days. Maybe now you can close in 5 days. And then there's this whole continuous close process that's going on as well. So that's cool. You're getting the information faster, but more and more is automated. So what can you do to add value to the business? And if you're going to be a strategic partner to the rest of the C-suite, you've got to have some of these predictive analytics in your tool belt. And I think it makes sense because it is tied to the financials. And, if I know, sales and marketing maybe is looking at churn if you're a subscription-based product or, other things. But as you're modeling as a finance guy, you want to know churn as well. So you sort of have to start finding ways to gather all this data and then use your analytical skills that you used in finance to apply to the rest of the key metrics of the business. And then you become a more valuable strategic partner.
Hey, Jim! Thanks for coming.
Are you kidding? I never miss one of your dinner parties. How's the new job?
We're growing fast. And I stopped working weekends, thanks to how much smoother everything runs on NetSuite by Oracle.
Fantastic. We're still using QuickBooks.
Why haven't you upgraded to NetSuite?
making QuickBooks work, sort of.
Shh, watch your language. The kids are right there.
Sorry, Amy. NetSuite gives you visibility and control of your financials, inventory, HR, planning, budgeting, and more. NetSuite is everything you need to grow, all in one place. And 93% of surveyed businesses increase their visibility and control since upgrading from QuickBooks to NetSuite.
Yeah, sounds like it's time for me to switch to NetSuite. Over 27,000 businesses already use NetSuite. And right now through the end of the year, NetSuite is offering a one-of-a-kind financing program to those ready to upgrade at netsuite.com/Kim. Head to netsuite.com/Kim for special end-of-year financing on the #1 financial system for growing businesses. netsuite.com/Kim.
Well, you just basically segued perfectly into my next question. One of the things that really stuck out to me in your book is this idea of some businesses look at finance teams as a cost center. How do you change that? How do you really transition finance teams into more of a value center and a valuable strategic partner? You touched on it a little bit, but do you mind kind of diving into that a little more?
Yeah, and it's funny, and it is so hard. As a finance guy, you want an ROI on everything you're going to spend money on. And then as a finance guy, I also realize, okay, it's like when you ask sales and marketing, well, what's the ROI on this ad spend? And that's, that's very hard to come up with. But as the finance guy, you want to really push them into it. So, and I think that any part of the business that is considered and I'm doing air quotes now, cost center is, that seems like a dirty word. And, you want to be contributing to the bottom line. And if you think about maybe what finance was, it was necessary, but even let's say 20 years ago when it really was just, hey, I'm going to make sure, it's compliance, it's closing the books, it's just, I'm going to tell you how the business is doing. We're going to do some FP&A, some budgeting, but that's kind of it. And it's kind of a necessary evil, I guess, to be able to report on how the business is doing. But beyond that, where's the value that finance is bringing to the business? So I think over time, and I think technologies enabled this a lot to become more and more forward-looking. And as you can build more complex models and really get better at predicting the future and at identifying trends. And so I think that, I don't know, there's a couple of ways to look at it. One is, so you're flying an F-22 fighter jet, and it costs whatever it costs, and it's it's got its flight controls and its armament and whatever. And the question is, what is the navigation system cost on this fighter jet? And it kind of doesn't matter, because with all the other cool things that it has, if you don't know where you're going, it's not it's not living up to its potential. So I see finance as being able to be that navigator, that navigation system. So yes, you have to spend the money on finance, but I guess maybe more to answer your question, there are things that finance can do. If you are, cash flow management is important. Revenue forecasting is important. Ways to, if you take these people who used to spend their time entering invoices in for payment and you repurpose them to maybe become more procurement specialists who can negotiate, there's opportunities for expense reduction. There's also a big department now that in a lot of companies, depending on the size and what they do, but fraud and risk is a big part of what they do. But if that rolls up under finance, being able to identify fraud, well, that's going to immediately add to the bottom line. And when you're not spending your time in these mindless tasks, you can find other ways of cost avoidance. But here's a very specific one, and I don't know if this applies to businesses of all sizes, but I've been in the kind of the under 25 million in annual revenue space for a while. And one thing that I've seen, and this is on the buy side and the sell side, like I mentioned in this industry, and then in previous industries, I've been through several transactions, and the companies that have good financial systems, if you're on the sell side, you can increase the value of the company because in due diligence, you show that you've got, these records and these trends, and very clear where your revenue is coming from, where your cost of goods sold are, and where your expenses are, and being able to really show the value of the business there. But if you're on the buy side, that it increases the value of the business, because if you have these processes in place, if you have a really strong finance department, and when I say finance, I'm also going to talk about the entire back office operations, from onboarding of customers to CRM to tracking, things like customer lifetime value and everything. You can't do these without having this data. And
Right.
if you have this data to people who would be investing in you, whether it's private equity or venture capital or whatever you're doing, when you can say, we know all this about our business, we have these processes in place, then that's going to make the investors more likely to invest in you and invest at a higher premium, because you could be the acquirer, you could be the company that is rolling up other companies under you. So there's tangible value, and there are things you could do, and you could talk about how finance saves you money, trying to prove in, pay for your whole department. It could be a losing battle. I don't think anyone's going to say that finance is not necessary. But then, to the last two examples I gave, I think you can also show the valuation of the business by having a really strong finance and back office operations department, that it increases the value of the entire business. And there's some intellectual IP and everything, but I feel like I'm rambling now. So
it's funny. I mean, sounds like you've done this before, and you've made this point before. And my question was going to be like, how do you prove the ROI of your finance team? What's your, strategy for that?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I just told you is what I would tell a CEO or an investor. And I would say, and then for my finance team, I talk about, look, you need to give me these resources and let me have access to these resources. And I guess one thing I want to throw in here is another thing. And if you read the book, I talk about democratization of data, and that is really important to me. I don't ever want finance to be the gatekeeper. No one in the company should be the gatekeeper of information. But as far as aggregating it and sort of being this chief data officer and providing all the information, it's like, if we make sure that we have good, reliable data, and we're overseeing that with support, with working with IT and the other departments in concert, but then making it available, not just they can come to us and get a report, but through dashboards and in ways that, regardless of the department I'm in, that I can get access to that data. That's when you've fully transformed the company, and you're in this data-driven place that is not just, well, let's go to the CDO or let's go to the CFO or whoever and see if we can get this information, but have everyone have access to this. So people, whether you're at a C level or a director level or a frontline employee or an analyst, being able to come up with run tests on the data and find business intelligence out of it. That's sort of the business nirvana for me.
Well, and that's music to our ears, because of course, NetSuite is all about making sure everybody across the organization, it has access to that data and that information to make the critical decisions in their role to improve, and help grow the business. But of course, if you have a business based completely on this is based on businesses who really do dive into the data and who have a handle on their data and who know how to use their data to, like what we talked about earlier, use their data to make the right decisions. But realistically, a lot of companies can't make that happen. Like we talked about, a lot of leaders and decision makers struggle to really make sense of their data. So I guess to kind of start, and I want to go into this a bit deeper after, but to start, like, for the more practical side of the equation, what advice do you have for companies in really helping get their finance teams and finance leaders in attaining some of those skills and really being able to extract data and understand it?
Yeah, Kendall, this is really, this isn't just finance that's having this issue. It's it's across the board in businesses. And business is hard. And what I'm about to say is hard, but it is the availability I think that if we're depending on how you define them, we're either in the fourth or fifth industrial revolution, going back to the 18th century of, the coal revolution. And then it was going through the other, and then up through the 20th century with electronics and computers. And then we're either, depending on whose definition you use, we're either fully in the fourth revolution now, or maybe we're at the beginning of the fifth revolution, which would be human intelligence and artificial intelligence working together. But so right now, I mean, I could argue how any business would benefit from collecting data, and whether you're a food truck or Netflix or Amazon, whatever. And obviously the Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google, they've got the greatest access to data. I mean, that's why the Facebook algorithms are so amazingly good at, putting content out there that is engaging. And we know the latest news with Facebook, that they're also, there's some ethics issues that they maybe should, and that could be a whole other podcast.
I was about to say, yeah. You mean, as soon as the words slippers come out of my mouth, I see them all over Facebook and Instagram, but yes.
Yeah. So, but I guess we have to find ways, and that's going to be interesting. And I think that NetSuite would be, there's an opportunity there. I think about QuickBooks when it came out, all these small businesses never had access to any kind of tool like that before. And then, suddenly every mom and pop place in the world could have accounting, but someone is going to figure out, and it could be Oracle, a way that for even small businesses, because even at a very small level, they don't have access to all this data. I can talk about ways that even if you had like I said, a food truck, there's interesting data that you could collect where you could start finding correlations between, I don't know, weather, time of day, where the food truck is parked, and, things that drive sales, time of year, temperature. You can find features to support data that will support your business. You just have to track it somewhere. And if you don't have the software, obviously you're not going to keep a spiral notebook. That's very hard to run algorithms on that. But any business that you're in, there is publicly available data, and then there's data about your business. And the models don't have to be super complex to start with. We don't have to be, trying to win the Netflix $1 million prize for recommending movies. It can just be, hey, we see that our business goes up when the temperature is below 90 degrees or whatever, pick your example. So it is difficult to gather the data, but every business has some kind of data that they can collect. And it's a question of how they're going to collect it and how they're going to integrate it. And for me, for my business now, it was NetSuite was the perfect tool to use to start collecting that data. And then it's what we do with it. And as far as the team goes, if you're going to be in the business world right now, the pace of technological change, no one has the luxury, or they won't for long, of being able to rest on their laurels and not keeping up with this. So you've got to start understanding as a business person, regardless of your role, what is the impact of artificial intelligence and machine learning? How are my competitors using it? And what do I need to do? And what do I need to learn to be able to use it for this business?
Well, and I think, a question you're sitting here talking about NetSuite and the impact NetSuite can have, and how, of course, it enables you to have access to that data and really understand the data in ways that are meaningful, impactful, and help you really drive important decision making. But I think the question comes in a lot is, at what point are spreadsheets or QuickBooks or any of these other tools not going to cut it? And when do I need to start investing? Like you said, it's what size or what milestone, what have you, is when do you need to start investing in technology like that? And I think that's a question we hear all the time from our prospect and customer base.
Yeah. And that's, I know for me, there's the short answer is is this. So, I mean, if you are a small mom and pop business, if you're a, donut shop or a nail salon or something that you have your business and that's what you do, then how much everybody can benefit from data, but you're kind of in this box, and you know that if you have a single donut store location, then probably you're not going to spend the money on a full ERP system. So, QuickBooks Online probably just makes sense for you, or you've just got your quarterly bookkeeper that, comes and plugs things in and you don't think about your accounting. But the difference between, to me, a small business and a startup is the startup is looking to scale, to get that exponential growth. And the company where I am now, we're not there with the exponent. Well, actually, that's not true. We've had a couple of really strong years of growth, but we want to get even bigger. We want to grow even faster. And we weren't going to do it with the old tools. So investing in an ERP system is like, it's a capital investment, and you don't want to wait until you're already in that hockey stick part of growth to be trying to switch your accounting system and your CRM and your project management tools. So we're making this investment in the business now. And this is what I would advise anyone to get ready for growth. Get your systems in place first so that you can handle it when it happens, because you don't want to be, building the airplane while you're flying.
Yeah. Oh, we hear that. What I think our metaphor is, you don't want to be building the car while you're speeding down the highway.
Yeah.
So yeah. So that's, that's, again, we hear this a lot of times. Our customers invested in NetSuite when they had a growth mentality and could see that they were going to need a system that could scale with them. And so it was the right time, like you said, to do it before you hit that hockey stick. It's the right time to do it.
Now, Glenn, I have a question for you. And we see with NetSuite, it does make things a lot easier in terms of technology and automation and taking a lot of data and bringing it down to a more accessible level. And that kind of ties in to the theme of your book and in our conversation right now. And it's that the better you understand technology, the better you can understand your company and what it needs and collaborate with other teams. It's important to be a technology-minded CFO, but what is realistic here for finance executives? What do they really need to know or do? And what's kind of the easiest way for them to get there?
As much as we'd like this to be, you need to know that NetSuite is the best for your business. We want to keep it real here.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's, NetSuite it is a great tool, but what are you going to do with it? And there's NetSuite out of the box, but then there's understanding what NetSuite is or what the structure of your data is. So do you need to go get a master's degree in, computer development and computer science? No. But the easiest thing that you have to do is understand how relational databases work and how unstructured data works, and understand the data that's out there and how you can get to it and what you can do with it. So that's understanding APIs that link, whatever system you're using to another system, to another tool, to exporting data from one system to another, and then understanding how databases work. And I always say, if I had to sit in front of a blinking cursor, then somebody's, to do my job, then somebody's made a horrible mistake. But it takes me a long time, but I can write a database query. It just, it would make a true database person cringe looking at me. But when you understand how that works, then you know how to get to the data. But that's only the first piece. I think that the next level for part of the skill set of the new age CFO is you have to be a statistician and a data scientist, meaning you don't have to be the data engineer that goes and builds the algorithms and everything, but you have to understand the value of the algorithms and what it is. What's the difference between machine learning and deep learning and artificial intelligence and robotic process automation? And these are all things that, this is going to sound flippant, but as simple as YouTube videos. I mean, there's so much information out there. And I think that's probably how I got started on AI and ML, is just watching a bunch of YouTube videos. But then there's Coursera and there's the other online learning platforms where you could even take these courses for free. If you don't want the fancy certificate to put on your LinkedIn, you can take the courses for free. And you get to a certain age and you've gotten your degree and your master's degree and you're a professional and you have kids and all that. But like I was saying earlier, that was good then. What have you done for me lately? You've got to keep up with the technology. So, and by you, I mean everyone in the finance department and really across the business, because it is moving so fast. So as far as what's realistic to expect, everyone on my team needs to know how to use. I mean, in my industry is a little different because we use machine learning in our actual customer facing products, but everyone on my team needs to understand this, and they need to have a basic understanding of data science, so that we can know that I'm not the only one that's standing on my soapbox and preaching this, and I don't have the team in place. So I'm upskilling and reskilling some people on my team. I'd love it if we get down, this time next year, if I've been able to actually hire a full-time data scientist on my team. I'm not there yet, but as we work to get there, everybody's got to kind of cross skill, and it's fun to collaborate. Once you can get not just my department, but the other departments in the company to see the value of this, it's been fun to collaborate about what this new business intelligence platform will be once we get there.
So, of course, yes, the future, looking ahead and seeing what you can accomplish with this information and this level of technology is amazing. But getting that, especially cross-organizational buy-in on digitization, as you called it earlier, digital transformation, which is the term everybody's been using for the past several years. And our SVP, Jason Maynard, would kill me knowing that I said it on this podcast, but it's digital transformation has become the kind of catch-all. Now, before we get into steps about how to get, cross-organizational buy-in on digitization, let's take a step back for a second. And I actually want to ask you, just curious to get your thoughts. What is digital transformation to you, and what is it not? I think a more precise definition coming from you, just to hear your take on it, would be interesting to hear.
Yeah, Kendall, I love this question, and here because I use this word a lot because it's one of those earworm kind of things, but it's a misnomer. And so you could have done a digital transformation like I talked about when you in the 90s when you moved to moved accounting to your desktop computers or to a corporate server. It's not a transformation because that implies it's one and done. It's an evolution, and the evolution is happening faster and faster. So I need to actually, I do love this question, and I understand why people get burned out on it, because digital transformation means one thing in the 2020s, it meant something different in the teens and before that. Yep. So, and it's never going to be done. So let's not put it out there like we've got to digitally transform our company. We've got to capitalize on and use the latest and greatest tools that are available to us. And they're increasingly more difficult to understand, but they make our lives increasingly easier. So the challenge for us across the board is, how do we keep up with this technology and how do we use it? So it's more of an evolution than a transformation, because
I was just thinking that. I guess what would we call this? Continuous digital evolution. Like this is not gonna, it's, I've been in social media for a good portion of my career as well. And that's the same thing with social media. Like everybody thinks, oh, you come up with a social strategy and then you're good to go. But guess what? That algorithm is changing every couple months. You constantly have to evolve with it. And obviously, in technology, the same thing is true. It's always going to continue to get to evolve and change. And, you gotta keep up with that. Right. And you got to get buy-in from your team. And I think that is probably, to wrap things up here, I think our last question. I know Megan and I have chatted about this a little bit leading into this podcast, but cross-functional, cross-organizational buy-in is not always easy. So how do you approach that? Or what advice do you have in approaching that with the company?
So I do go into this in detail in the book, and I'm going to say it's a lot easier if you have a C in your title, but if you don't, what I talk about is small wins and going to other people. It's almost like citizen development, and some companies really try to shut this down, and that's a whole other podcast too. But if you can, so someone from finance, someone from sales, someone from operations get together, they see the value of a data-driven company, and they look for small wins that they can do. So I talk about building this sort of guerrilla team, this groundswell team that is from functional people in the groups that are aware of what's going on and aware of the value that's out there. And then if you can have something that it's not just Bob in finance and Mary in sales, coming up with these ideas that may seem far-fetched, but if you could find these small wins and you have a cross-functional group, and then so you take that, assuming this could be just frontline level employees, you come up with these strategies, and then you find who the champion is. Is it is it the IT guy? Who's the person that you can help run it up? But finding these small wins is a big way to start getting support early on. If you've got a management team that doesn't understand why do we need to do this, things are fine the way they are. It's about showing these simple, small victories, and then kind of helping them see the roadmap in the future of what's possible.
Yeah, taking those small wins, it kind of reminds me of something you said in the book that made me chuckle. It's the taking a small bite at the elephant. It all seems so overwhelming, but just like little by little, we'll get there. So you briefly mentioned one challenge that you see, which I think is common in a lot of businesses. It's, well, we're fine, so why do we have to do this? But then you have a major event or even something smaller come along, for instance, COVID, and all of a sudden things aren't fine and you're kind of rushing along trying to catch up and pick up pace. So are there any other common challenges that companies face with getting buy-in, and how can they be more proactive in handling them?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest challenge is if leadership doesn't see the value. If it's, we're a manufacturing company and we manufacture things this way, and we've done it for all these years, and we're consistent, and we're not going to go just change the way the company works, and they don't see the value of it. That's the biggest challenge to overcome. And that's, I don't know, there's not a magic bullet for that. It's you have to be, part psychologist and
storyteller and
yeah. But beyond that, there's cost and ROI. It just as finance would hold any other group accountable for the ROI. And it can be difficult to say that you're, trying to justify a spend either in headcount or in new software or whatever it is, when, if you've got someone who's reluctant to buy in on that and they're saying, well, I don't understand, what is this good as that we don't have now? I think it's, if you can point to people in your industry who are using data science and business analytics to an advantage, that's great, but it's, depending on the industry, it may be hard to find that. So really it takes someone in the company, and you hope it's at the highest level so that it can permeate through the company, but someone in the company has to have that vision and see the value in it. And that's why, but if you get behind on keeping up with the latest technology, then you don't even know what's possible. So, so I think education and just like with anything else in business, it's, it's having that strategic vision, understanding the landscape, and sort of seeing a way to carve your path through it.
So we've sat here and we're coming to the end of our recording. Time flies when you're having fun, of course. But you've told me and you've told our audience the ways in which to be better in finance, to be a better CFO. I'm going to flip the script on you a little bit. And I'm going to conclude here with a final question, which is, what skill or area do you think you need to improve on to be better in your CFO role? And then from that, what advice would you share for up and coming CFOs?
Yeah, good question. I think the last thing we want to do is suffer from hubris that makes us blind to where our faults are. And I think, I think that there is a danger for anyone at the CFO level of you get so far removed from the day-to-day operations that you sort of overlook the fundamentals of how the finance department works. So I think it's important and I'm guilty of this as well. I mean, it's been a busy year between opening offices in other countries and trying to learn about things that I've never dealt with international companies before. So, transfer pricing, and there's been all kinds of interesting, like dealing with German tax authorities has been really interesting. But I think that staying in contact with the entire finance department and understanding, and looking at the trial balance every month, digging into the stuff that that you didn't have to, that you don't have to do anymore because someone else is. You don't want to lose touch with that. But I also think, and then there's, of course, the ongoing changes to tax law or whatever that may impact your business. And I guess the biggest thing for me is that I have to stay vigilant, not just about the industry that I'm in, but about the tools and software that are out there, and don't just rest on, this worked fine last year, so it's what we're going to do in the future. So my advice would be stay in contact with your entire team, understand the processes you're doing, understand where the bottlenecks are, because that's an area for improvement, and keep abreast of the newest technology and what's going on, not just in your industry, but in finance, software, and technology in general.
That's great. What a way to end, Glenn. Thank you so much. I guess the only thing I want to ask, is there anything else you'd want to add before we sign off here?
No, I think we covered it. This has been a great conversation. I think I rambled on longer than you guys were saying you wanted me to, so I apologize.
Oh, no, you didn't.
No, we love to hear it. We love to kind of delve into people's thoughts on this and really get into the nitty-gritty details. So we really enjoyed it.
Yeah, this has been great.
Wow, what a great conversation with Glenn. I think I could have kept talking to him for so much longer. I loved that advice on making sure you have the right systems in place before it's too late. I think the metaphor Glenn used was, you don't want to build the plane while you're flying it. And I think that's so important. And that's again, like I said in the episodes, that's a conversation we have a lot with our customer base.
Right. And I just loved hearing more about his background and really how that shaped the CFO that he is today. It's incredibly fascinating, and he's got a really diverse amount of experience.
Yeah, I know. I love that he started as a journalist. I'm like, maybe I'll be a CFO one day. Right? Just kidding. I'm not a numbers person, but hey, I love to hear it. So thank you so much to Glenn Hopper for joining us on this episode. And if you're tuning in right now and you want to hear more from him and even jump into the hot seat with some interview questions yourselves, make sure you join our webinar with him on January 12th. I've left a link in the description of this episode to register. And I also, Megan, want to be sure before we sign off here to thank you again for co-hosting with me. We'll have to do this again sometime for sure.
Oh, I would love that. Thank you again for having me.
I also want to thank our editing crew over at Lampstand in Oklahoma City. I don't know if you guys caught that, but that's the one other city. I think if I was to move out of LA, Oklahoma City and Nashville are my two hot spots. Don't ask why. I mean, Nashville, music, Oklahoma. I just think the people are the best. So Lampstand, all of you over in OKC, thank you. And as always, to all of you for tuning in, and don't ever miss episodes like this one by subscribing to our channel. And hey, if you have some time, give us a rating and review, and we would greatly appreciate it. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
You just listened to the Netsuite Podcast. Be sure to tune in every week with more Netsuite developments, stories, and insights into the benefits of one integrated system to help you run your business.